Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our last Veeam Partner Academy of this year. As always, we need to do four, and the fourth of them will take place today. Today, I'm joined by Stijn Marivoet from Veeam. So I will be giving a short update regarding the Veeam licensing changes that are about to come in the very near future. And Stijn will take us through immutable backups with Veeam, what it is, how to do it, and so on. During the presentation, as always, we send out the slides, so just please mute yourself. If you've got questions, put them in the chat, and Eric or myself, we can answer them. If we can't answer directly, then you can expect an answer through mail. Before we're gonna dive into the licensing part, most people might know me because I was always, let us say, the face or the name on the emails regarding questions from Veeam. Now our team has significantly grown in the recent coming days. So in Belgium, I've got a new colleague, Mats Nilsson. He's currently in training, but you will slowly start to see his name popping up. And we've got also two new people in our shared business center. You might also receive mails from them, mostly from them regarding POs, information that's missing, or POs that needs to be amended. So this brings us to the slide that I always use, how to reach us. You can always reach out directly to me for any type of question, or you may use the general inbox as well. I'm behind that inbox, Mats is behind that inbox, and also Mirek and Agatha. So you've got our contact details. If you got questions regarding the VCSP program, then you can reach out to my colleagues. I can help you with that as well, but regarding pricing and contact creation within Aerosphere, that needs to be addressed by my colleagues. This will bring me to my actual topic of today. I'm not sure that everybody is aware. I know that Veeam has sent out mails, of course, towards us, but also directly to end users. I'm not sure if they've informed the resellers, but I do expect that that this is the case. Now, before we're gonna go into that, I just want to touch shortly on the existing situation. So as you all know, this what's seen on the left-hand side in the blue table, if you've got an existing Veeam customer, these are the products that you can buy. So you can purchase Veeam Backup Replication Enterprise with basic support only if it's in an actual ongoing support contract. If you are a brand new Veeam customer, that means that the changes from January 1st that still are valid. Veeam Backup Replication and Veeam Availability Suite comes only in the Enterprise Plus model with production support. The Veeam Backup Essentials, that still remains available in the 3 known editions with the 2 known support cases. Regarding upgrades, in the past you were able to upgrade from standard towards enterprise, but that's also as of January the 1st, that's not possible. So if an end user wants to upgrade from standard towards enterprise, it's always immediately towards enterprise plus. So this is the current situation, that you can still ask prices at us, offer towards your customers. But as of course the landscape is changing, Veeam will be making changes on their licensing model, and it's a significant change that will impact the way of doing your business, being in contact with your customer. So Veeam is following the strategy like many other vendors are changing their licensing model, meaning from the perpetual towards the subscription only. This will mean that the sale will end. It's a hard stop on July 1st. So everything that we can still process on June 30th, that will be possible. Everything after that's within the per socket perpetual licensing model will no longer be you will no longer be able to buy it through us and at Veeam. So that's no longer possible. I try to give a very brief summary in this slide. So if you've got an existing customer up until June the 30th, what can you do? You can immediately buy Vul. That's also still possible now. You can do the migration. That's something that you might encounter more and more in the next coming weeks and months. This is mostly driven by Veeam at this moment. We will also be doing a session Q1 and Q2 next year, how to approach these migrations, how to get into contact with your end user, what the added value is, and so on. You can perfectly renew them. That's still not a problem. And like I said earlier, the sockets, you can still buy them, but only if it's active within the end user's install base. So then you can still add new sockets. If you're a new customer, like I said, up until June 30th, you can perfectly buy Vul, of course, because that's the new way to go. And you can add still sockets, but then that's only limited towards the Enterprise Plus edition for VBR and VAS. As of July 1st, what will change? Of course, Vul. That's more than logic. The migrations, and I just briefly said it. At this moment in time, when Veeam engages with your end user, in most cases, a migration will be proposed. Why is that? Also because all of the newest releases and features that are behind the licensing model are only is only available through the Vul model. So, for instance, Veeam backup for Salesforce that will come in a certain period of time. You've got Veeam backup for AWS, for Azure. That's only available through the Vul licensing model. You will still be able to do renewals, of course, of perpetual licenses. That's still possible, but it's in effect, it's a hard stop on sockets. You will not be able to buy sockets, regardless the case, regardless the end user entity or size or whatever. It's no longer possible. We cannot purchase it anymore. So you may eventually no longer offer it at your customers. Still, yeah, of course, if you're a new customer, Vul, okay, that still remains available, of course, because that's the new way to go. And this goes along with, for the sockets, this is a hard stop as well. So this, keep in mind that if you've got projects and it's still per socket, perpetual per socket based licensing, that you've only got a period of time up until June the 30th. So keep that in mind. That I know that economical situations, COVID and so on, it's not been easy on the market as well. But this is something that you need to keep an eye on. I know that projects might be pushed back due to budgetary reasons and so on, but this will be no longer able. You will no longer be able to purchase these as of July 1st. So that's something you really need to keep in mind. I just briefly want to touch on the migration towards subscriptions. So how are migrations being created? It's renewals, new business, co-terming. This is something that we as Arrow perfectly can do. But the migration, this is only being done by Veeam themselves. Now they've also recently got a migration team. So that's a team that's only working on migrations from perpetual towards subscription. So of course, a migration, it's not that one CPU socket will give you one bundle of Vul licenses. There are certain requirements, and what do we need? And I already want to touch shortly upon to this point, because we will be the sales cycle might be a bit longer for Veeam in the migration phase, because Veeam will require a certain set of information. So they need to know what the current situation is, about how many physical servers are we talking, what's the underlying infrastructure for where the VMs are on running, how many VMs have you got, and so on. And the easiest way to do it is simply to provide Veeam with the Veeam logs. I've added the knowledge base article. If you type in Google Veeam logs, it's, as always, it's very clear described by Veeam how you can extract those log files. There's even a short movie that shows you step by step how to extract that information. You need to ship that towards us, and we ship it at Veeam, and they look into the output of the Veeam environment to see what exactly is required or needed for Veeam to build the migration proposal. The product overview, I'm not going to go very detailed into this part. I just added it as we will be sending out the slides, but this is a new overview where you can see what you need to keep in account of, because still up until this moment, when we send out offers, and maybe still when it's mixed, for instance, if you got Veeam backup and replication, one socket, the quantity on our offer is 1, but if we put VBR full and the quantity is 1, of course it's not 1 license, it's 10 licenses, but it's 1 bundle. So I've added it just for your information, so you are aware that if you need to start counting, because we also do ship out the price list, that if you start counting, that you don't, because I've got a lot of resellers that are trying to calculate their prices themselves, but they tend to forget that one bundle contains a certain amount of licenses. And I just wanted to add this information that you need to be aware of. If it's, for instance, for a Veeam availability suite in Vul, if you got 50 VMs to protect, then you need 5 bundles. You don't need 50, because then you've got way too much licenses. Then you've got 500 licenses. So this will give you, of course, a wrong idea and impression regarding pricing. So this is merely for your information, as you are familiarized with the bundles. So VAS and VBR is always sold by 10, and Veeam Backup Essentials is always sold in bundles per 5, and it's limited and up until 50 instances. So that's also important to know. So this will replace the limit of the 6 CPU sockets in the perpetual licensing model. Of course, these two, I've just added them because it's also in the subscription licensing model, but it's not part of Vul. But what's part of Vul, that's something that we're not going to touch upon today. We'll do that in the next coming Veeam Partner Academies to put more emphasis on what is Vul, what is the added value. So today was merely, before I give the word to Stijn, today was merely to already inform you and to alert you that big changes are coming, because Veeam is known on the market for quite some years. The perpetual licenses was the basic license or the standard license which Veeam has always been sold through. This will stop with a hard date. So it was my goal and Arrow's goal to already inform everybody that it will come to an end. And then this will leave it for me. So if there are any questions, you may always reach out to me by phone, through mail, and then I can see how I can help you and how fast I can help you with your answers. And this leaves it about for me. So I'm gonna give the word to Stijn from Veeam that will give us a short or a detailed insight regarding immutable backups with Veeam.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sven. There was one question, however. I did a follow-up in the chat, and I saw somebody asking something about the free agents that were included with the Veeam editions. So to be very brief on that, indeed, once you reach the threshold, I think from 6 CPU sockets that were licensed, you were gifted some agents for free. And then the more you used and consumed, the more that were gifted, up to a certain point in time that it actually stopped. Yeah, and then you were given the maximum allowed part of free gifted instances. Now, how does that work with instance licensing or the Vul licensing? Actually, more or less the same, because we give you a margin of 10%. So imagine you got 50 VUL licenses to cover 50 virtual machines, then actually you can go up to 55. And that is to give the stretch to do some, I would say, new projects that are coming up. And then you are given that extra stretch to deploy new servers and to replace older servers. For instance, if you do an OS upgrade and stuff like that. We always know that a migration is not done instantly, and that's mainly the reason why. So I hope this answers more or less the question.
Well, I think I thought in the past, I think up until 6 instances were gifted freely in VBR. I'm not sure in VAS, and I know that
Yeah.
it's in the past there was also free. I think it was about it's 500 gigabytes of NAS share backup that's
Yeah.
also included.
The first slot of NAS backup actually
Yeah,
we don't charge. Yeah, that's
yeah,
the caveat, like we say. Yeah.
yeah.
But
So.
it's a positive one. So.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, you don't often get something free, and of course, Muriel, if you want to test something, there's always still the community edition.
Yeah.
It's for yeah. To be quite honest, I'm not going to make too much marketing noise about it because it in fact it's a very nice proposition by Veeam. So you can download and test the VUL licenses to test agents and so on. The limit for VBR and VAS is 10 instances. The limit for VBO 365 is also 10 users. The only thing that you need to keep in account of course, one, it's not allowed to run in a production environment, and there is no support by Veeam, so it's
No,
community support.
it is allowed for production, but it's not allowed
Oh,
to be managed by a partner to be sold as a solution. That's the key.
okay, like that. So
Yeah.
if an end user does it, then
But this is a perfect solution if you have a doctor practice in the local town and the doctor is asking you, do you know something about backup? Then suggest a community edition. So the doctor will use community edition to protect his own PCs and the one of his lab or whatever. That's a perfect use case. Or the small vegetable store next around the corner. Very small instances, very small install bases. That's an ideal purpose. In the end, you as a partner, you will not, or you will never gain any service out of that contract anyhow. So it's just they do their own thing on their own stuff, and that's basically it. Yeah. So I think we arrived on the second part. The second part, however, I know the first part I don't understand anything about it because it's licensing. Yeah, I'm a system engineer, so I'm mainly technical. This is the part where it's going to be technical. So for the non-technical people, try to keep up because it will get hard. Yeah. So let's kick out. I'll give you also a short introduction of Veeam backup and replication. I'm going to highlight things. I'm going to speed over those things to arrive on the main chunk, in fact. So the Linux immutability that we added as a support in V11. Also the tiering to S3 immutability object storage, which is quite nice. And if you combine those two, you have actually an unbeatable solution against any ransomware attack. Now, I know a lot of people and partners are making end clients afraid of ransomware attacks, and you should be, because not for Veeam, not necessarily on Veeam, but you should make them aware on ransomware attacks. Yeah, when I joined Veeam a few years ago, a ransomware attack was like, oh my god, he's got attacked by ransomware. It was something, wow, it was news, it was unique. Yeah, I would say. Nowadays, I've actually being called every 3 weeks by a bigger customer saying we had something, what should we do, what are the measurements that we could take. So it's getting more or less like a negative hype, I would say. I will highlight some nice combos, and if there is time remaining, I'm guess not but I have a small surprise on a next version coming up. So let's jump over. These are the marketing numbers. I'm not going to deep dive into it. Basically, everybody at Veeam using Veeam are still happy with Veeam, and they will very likely renew with Veeam. So let's jump into VBR. This is the main setup of a client. I'm going to try something new. I've got a new laptop, so if things are going terribly wrong, Sven, please interrupt me, but it should do the trick. So this one is actually Veeam Backup and Replication. This is an all-in-one server, and it's really important to understand that the all-in-one server is going to be disappearing if you want to enable immutability. Why? Because there are some security constraints. Yeah? So over here, this one is the management server. For me, you can drop it in a virtual machine. It's a perfect use case. The proxy server, however, can be, certainly if you use Hyper-V, it can be one that is being placed also on a virtual machine, or it can become a physical proxy machine if you do, and I'll talk to that later, some snapshot integration, mainly for the bigger sandboxes that are supported by Veeam. And then we got a last component that we can cut out and put in a separate role, that is the repository server. And this one is and will be the main focus for this webinar. So what do? Well, actually we do a backup, and it's important to know how we process the backup in order to understand why we should split up components. Yeah, if we take a backup, mainly we talk to the hypervisor, we snapshot it and stuff like that. We might take the data from over here or from over here, depending on the setup. It will be handled by the proxy. So basically the proxy is the one who's doing all the work for you, and it will dump its files on a repository server. So that is basically the setup. What is that management server doing then? Well, it will say, guys, it's 20. Oh, so it's 8 p.m. You start working. What should you do? This virtual machine or this group of virtual machines and stuff like that. So that is the management thing doing. What is not on the page? That is something called Enterprise Manager, and it's very frequently forgotten. Enterprise Manager, what does it do? It's basically a web GUI, and a lot of features are being added in the next version of Veeam. So we're talking about version 12. Yeah? Not accurate today, but it will come in the near future. So what can we do? Well, basically what a backup program should do, we can restore virtual machines. We have fancy features, yeah, like the Sure Backup and the Data Labs. We have something that is being built in and is commonly being mistaken by other products. We have something like replication, which means we have a VMware object on one hypervisor, and we can more or less copy paste that VMware object towards a other hypervisor running in a other data center and running over here and prepare, in fact, everything for a failover. There is a secondary mechanism that is new and is covered by VUL and the Enterprise Plus edition, which is called CDP. Mainly, very briefly, every bit and byte changes on machine on the right side will be moved over to the other side, and not on a large time frame, but on a second time frame. Yeah? So it's very productive. Already mentioned the snapshot integration. Something also very important to know is the backup copy job. Also mentioned this component will be the main focus, but that means also on this component, because basically it's the same component. Everything will be possible. This component is also a very important component that will be touched later on. It's the object storage, and in this case S3 compatible storage, and the tape. Yes, indeed, tape is still not dead. Tape is your last resort if everything goes wrong. Everything, I mean, imagine you have two data centers. One is being burned down, the other one is being flooded during the perfect summer we had with a lot of rain. It can happen. Well, tapes can still save you, yeah? At least if this one is not in the real cloud, I would say. Yeah. We do NAS backup. We have agents, also mentioned by Sven earlier with the licensing. And we have plenty of enterprise plugins not being covered today. We have something, and this is quite cool to add, something running in cloud. There are three main components in cloud. I would say we have Azure, we have AWS, and we have other types like AWS compatible, so S3 compatible object storage. What is really important to know about Azure, because if we talk about immutability, everybody knows in the meanwhile that we can have some S3 immutable storage. However, we have S3 compatible immutable storage, like other vendors provide in their own cloud, or the boxes that you can buy from certain vendors that you can pull in your data center with S3 compatible storage. However, on Azure, this immutable storage is not yet possible. Yeah, keep in mind the yet. Why is that? Because everything that we ship from over here towards object storage are like dots in a cloud. Yeah? Every dot on its own is being tagged as being immutable. Yeah? This is the way how S3 compatible storage works, or S3 storage works in Amazon. Yeah? And we can lock those objects. That is the main difference with Azure. In Azure, we move those blobs in this case, not really object, but blobs. Yeah? But they cannot be tagged individually. So what we can do and what you can do on Azure is lock this whole container. But if a container is locked, you cannot add anything to it, you cannot clean it up, you cannot do anything with it. So basically, this is the reason why Azure immutability is still not supported. Azure did notice something. They missed petabytes of data of immutable storage, so they're working on a solution for it. Yeah. Now let's jump to the immutability tag, and then we're talking about those two components. Yeah? I already mentioned those two components. It is the repository server. We're going to talk a little bit about Linux. Keep in mind, Linux itself, I'm not the Linux expert. Yeah, I did discover a lot on my own, and it's still understandable for me. So when I used to be a student, everything that I'd done with that penguin went wrong. It really went wrong, but I was able to set this up, so I'm quite sure that you can set it up as well if you have limited knowledge of Linux. Yeah? What is this thing actually? I will talk about this performance tier later on, but basically it is just a Veeam component. It's the repository. Yeah, you can drop your files, the Veeam generated files on it. Yeah, that's really important to know. It will give you a protection, and if you set it up really good, it will give you a very good protection. Yeah? It will have the Linux immutability integration that is basically actually something that the OS provides. So first question that pops up then in your mind should be like, does Windows have that too? No, Windows does not have that. So we cannot give that to Windows fans, I would say. It can only, at the moment at least, it can only exist on Linux. Huh? And yes, as a partner, actually, it will allow you to make some kind of a box and tell to the client, if you deploy this in your data center, this is the my partner appliance, I would say, that is immutable and that can be used by Veeam. So you can make your own boxes, in fact, with your own Linux. And that is something that is really important to know. We are not going to provide you an OVA, for instance, by provided by Veeam, or an install disk by Veeam. It is really important to know that we more or less refuse to do that, because you can choose out your own OS yourself. If you prefer Ubuntu, you go for Ubuntu. If you prefer Red Hat Enterprise Edition, then you go for the Red Hat Enterprise Edition, if you want to pay those licenses for it. Yeah, it is entirely your choice. Why is that? Because at the moment there is a vulnerability somewhere. It's being published, it's out now. The OS they will provide you the required patches. Yeah, and if you have the required patches available, you can patch those vulnerabilities, and because of that, it's easy fixed. Yeah, you do not have to wait for a vendor to recompile, to run all the tests again, and then provide you a fix for something that is wrong in his software. No, it's just a OS patch. Yeah, that's something really important to know. Also, really important to know, maintenance. We do not store any passwords anymore on this thing. That's the funny thing, and I will explain how that happens. It's also important to know how things used to work. Yeah, in the version 10, so in the earlier version, actually every time you had some file, imagine a VBK file, you wanted to drop that on a repository, so the proxy is going to push data towards your repository, then actually this one will deploy a data movers process at runtime to receive that VBK and drop it on a disk. Yeah? The big advantage on this one, afterwards it's being killed and being dropped out again, the big advantage on that one is it's always up to date, because you do not have to do anything at all. Yeah, if you upgrade your Veeam server or you patch it for something, well, this one will run the next day in the next version, period. So no work to do. Yeah, the disadvantage on that, if this one was actually a Linux box, then you had to have something like root privileges to drop it every time at runtime to spin up that process. And that is pretty annoying, because at that point in time you have to store a password in Veeam, and it's not so very secure. Another thing, in order to deploy that every time, you have to have SSH open. Yeah, meaning a hacker would be able to enter your environment, retrieve some kind of a password, jump into SSH, abuse some kind of a vulnerability, and in the end wipe out your complete Linux repository. Yeah? Same for Windows, by the way. Now, what is going to happen in version 11? In version 11, this box will become a hardened box. Yeah? We will deploy one time the data mover process. It will stay there. It will run unlimited user permissions, like I would say like a Veeam user. Yeah, it's almost readable, I would say. Yeah? So the data mover, and it will be a Veeam user that will run that service. You will be able to drop your VBK files because you talk to the process. Yeah, and the Veeam user actually drops it on the disk. So you will see VBK file appearing on the disk. Yeah. However, SSH, you don't need it anymore. There is no outbound going connection. You just talk to the service. That's it. So it's an improvement. How does it work? I partially mentioned it already. I will rephrase just like I did in the beginning. It's 8 p.m. Dear Mr. Proxy, you need to start working. You need to back up this file, this virtual machine. So the proxy is going to tackle this one. It takes a snapshot, and well, the thing is in consistent mode. It takes a snapshot, and at that point in time, all the information is dropping back on the proxy server. It's actually performing its work. It will spin up also a data mover process, and it will talk to the fixed deployed data mover process over here, meaning it will, imagine this has a very big disk on it. It will have a VBK. I think I have to check the date. Today it's day 17. Yeah, it will be at the moment that it drops the file, if it's right configured in VBR, so on this server actually, it will drop the immutability tag. Yeah? And it will also say it will be the immutability tag for the next 7 days. Yeah? Of starting from today. And if I count roll, it is from the moment it's 24 November it will become released, I would say. Yeah. Next day, VIB minus I plus 7 day. It will be the 25th, 26th, and so on and so on. So at a certain point in time, imagine now, it is the 24th. What will happen? Inside this server, there is a running process that will, and it's Linux, it's nothing special for Veeam, it will have a local running process. It will always run on root credentials, yeah? And it will be capable to detect, well, this date has been expired. I will remove this immutability tag, meaning it will become possible to remove that file. Yeah? You have to keep in mind that at the moment a file in Linux is being tagged as -i, all the permissions are being removed, and it will become impossible, like really impossible, to remove that file. Yeah. Now, what is the best setup now to set up this server? By the way, Sven, if you see questions popping up, it is quite complex, so feel free to interrupt me. So this is a concept, actually. This is how Veeam pushes file towards Linux. It's Linux only. Yeah, it's nothing special. It's not Veeam functionality. Yeah, we just use the functionality within Linux. Now, how do we deploy this thing? Well, actually, at the moment we deploy this data mover, SSH has to be open. SSH has to be open for the one-time deployment. We will use that root access, yeah, for the complete setup. But afterwards, this root password has to be like enormously long, impossible to remember, and basically that file with that root password, because it's written down, yeah, you have to put it in a vault. Yeah. You as a technician should not know the password for the vault, yeah? Because there is a risk. If you are a bad administrator, so at the client side, if you're a bad administrator and you really have bad intentions, at that point in time, you could pull out a paper out of the vault and should read the root password and mess up things over here. That's absolutely not the goal. The goal is actually that the manager who is incapable of working with Linux and does not know anything about root and whatever, he should know the password of the vault. Yeah? Meaning that there is some kind of a multi-factor authentication with two persons, I would say. So there's always a check who is using what. Yeah? SSH, on the contrary, should be disabled. Yeah? The server will need to become an island on its own. The only thing that will be spoken to will be that data mover process. Yeah? And it will only be capable dropping files, removing files, if the retention has been expired and the immutability has been expired. Yeah? Meaning one more little security gap, I would say. You know, there are some management cards, I would say. I don't know all the names of those management cards, but the management cards are actually being plugged in on the server. There is still one risk. It's better to pull out the cable of that management card. And that's a tricky one. It's always like, yes, but. Yeah? Yes, but indeed. This one will avoid a malicious insider, so the administrator that has just been fired, remotely connecting to the management card and pulling the button like reset to factory settings and then remove everything. In fact, that is the only reason actually why you should remove the management card. With the downside, very likely management card is being used for a hardware follow-up, and if a disk crashes, you will actually get notified if the management card is being connected. So it's like the level of paranoia you want to use is actually the level of paranoia that you have to apply on this thing. That is basically it. But with this solution, actually you will be able to have a bulletproof solution. I also have frequently the question like, can this be on a hypervisor? And I say, for testing purposes, yes, you can do that. But for production purposes, I would say do it for sure not. Why not? If you have the bad hacker coming into your environment and it's jumping through and it will be capable of attacking actually the hypervisor or the vCenter or whatever, basically you will allow him or to gain access through console on this server, or just remove the disks in below on the SAM. Actually, it's pretty easy to just right click, remove from, delete from disk in VMware, for instance, and all of a sudden all your backups are gone. And once your backups are gone, we know the rest of the story. You just start, as a good hacker, you start encrypting the environment. And that is absolutely not a goal. Funny thing, if this is immutable, it's impossible to encrypt. You cannot access it. You even cannot get on the server because there is no access on the server to the server. You can only add new files and all the rest is being managed on its own. And that is the funny thing. It's really an island on its own. So forget about the hypervisor. Don't do it. No questions yet, Sven? Because that was a complex part. In Veeam, actually, it's pretty easy. Put a checkbox on. That's it. For an end user, it's really easy. So for the partner to do the setup and assist the client on it, it's the previous slides, I would say. For the client itself, it's just checkbox and fill in the dates. How does it look like if you want to delete? I think I've got an example. This is the example on Linux itself. So you see the I appearing. All those files are actually immutable. It's impossible to remove them unless you are the super admin with root privileges, with a password next to you. Then you could do some harm. So that is the only risk. That's why the password should be in a vault. This is what happens if you take Veeam backup and replication and you do right-click delete from disk, for instance. It cannot be deleted. It's being skipped because it cannot touch those files because those files are immutable. And it really is like this. It's nothing else. Those who have seen it already, you see over here there are 3 files being immutable, and you see a count of 4. That is a funny side effect because we have some kind of a log file as well. Now, do you want to try it out? That's the reason why I mentioned, if you want to try out and test things, do it for sure on a hypervisor. Take a snapshot of that Linux machine and do it step by step. So if something goes wrong, you revert a snapshot and then at least you don't have to start all over from scratch. You can use a tool. It's being created by my colleague Timothy, actually, and it will assist you on the steps. The steps are, there are plenty of steps, and this will make your life a little bit easier. So it's perfect thing to try out. If you want to play a little bit around, you can also use my personal website. It's veeamclick.be. There are some clickable demos on it, and on those components part, it's the architecture components, because a repository is a component within Veeam. I highlighted in green the immutability repository, and over there you can actually take that website on one screen and your production environment or test environment on your own screen, and then do side by side and do it step by step. You can normally also copy paste the comments if I'm not mistaken, so it's quite funny. I made that website actually for the partners because I had plenty of questions popping up certainly about this topic. How do we do that? And I had to repeat myself over and over, and now I just point them to the URL and I say, go ahead, play around with it. But you can use the same website for demo purposes. If you use it like, hey, dear customer or prospect, it's like this. It is that easy to create a backup job in Veeam. There are plenty of examples. Also, the restores. There are plenty of easy restores, like a file level restore, but also a SQL revert log files and whatever you want, very complex restores that are there just to click around. Yeah, it's pretty easy. Now, if we go one step further, we had this one being covered now. This one for the secondary copy also being covered. So you have your data center one, a secondary data center, or a cloud provider, and you have the copy in a immutable format. There is another layer of, I would say, attention that we can add, and that's the object storage. Mentioned that pretty briefly. It will not cover this Azure part. Now, before we jump into it, you have to know what is actually a scale-out backup repository. This is one of those repositories. Yeah? Direct attached storage. It can be a Linux immutable storage, for instance. Yeah? How does it used to be? Well, you used to have a backup job pointing towards a repository. You had a backup job number 2 pointing to a other repository, backup job 3 pointing, for instance, also to this one. Yeah. Now, within version, I think it was introduced in version 9.5 update 4, you can make things easier. Yeah, you can make those things for the lazy administrator, and it will not go directly to a repository. It will go to the scale out backup repository. So you're pointing to something that is logical, and Veeam will do the rest for you. Yeah? Also, next iteration, version 12, it will introduce a lot more on those things. Yeah? The good thing is, now if he creates a new backup job, he just have to point to the logical unit, and that's it. Yeah? There is, however, I think it's not in the next slide. This has an advantage. So this is the new situation then. It has an advantage that you can pull out a extent towards something what we say cloud storage, infinite storage, because if you point really to the cloud, then actually you can consume as much as you want. Yeah? Now I'm going to skip the marketing slide, but basically it's pretty easy. So this is the one, the performance tier. So it can be our Linux immutable repository, it can be our NAS, a secondary Linux immutable repository, it can be whatever you want. Also dedupe devices are still supported over there. Yeah? Now we can move or copy files, and Veeam will do that in the most productive way. If you have a VBK and a VIB, first, before doing a stupid copy paste toward object storage, we will cut it into pieces of 1 megabyte and then gradually move it towards this capacity tier. Yeah? This is step 1. Yeah? Capacity tier on immutability can be found over here. This one, by the way, can be on-prem. Yeah? That's the main differentiator. You can buy a storage box and put it on-prem, for instance, if you are not allowed to go on the cloud. Yeah? Those are immutability compatible at the moment. So it's a policy. It's really transparent. Once again, it's a checkbox, and it will move over towards object storage. Yeah? So there's nothing really difficult for the administrator. You just have to watch out. Indeed, you do put things in cloud. You start to consume things. If it's a little, you have to pay a little. If it's becoming a lot, then you have to pay more. Yeah, that's the I would say the caveats, like they say. Next slide. I'm not going to too much in detail about move mode or copy modes. It's very well explained on our help center. But basically it will move out older files, and if you do a copy, well, guess what? It's doing it instantly after the backup has been created. So checkbox, pretty easy. Move the old files. It has an advantage moving old files. Why? You can clean up your on-prem repository faster. Yeah. Imagine you have a backup job with a retention of 60 days and you put over here 30. Start moving off towards cloud. Well, there you go. It will only contain on-prem 30 days, but will still guarantee the other 30 days in the cloud. Yeah? The copy, why is that so important? It's important for the combination thing that I will cover just in a few minutes. Now, we are in version 11, and this one was introduced in the latest. So in version 11, we have something like archive tier. Everybody was asking us, can we move to archive tier? Yes, you can now in version 11. Even about object storage, a lot of things are coming up in the next version, version 12 then. What is archive tier? Archive tier, it's an archive. That's the main message. Watch out. Yeah. It does not cost a lot to put things over there and to keep things over there. So the consumption price is acceptable, affordable, and I would not say pretty low, but it is actually low. Yeah. However, pulling out data does have a cost. Yeah. If this one has, I would say, a dollar cost, yeah, this one will have a very high cost. And the other thing that is pretty annoying, this one is always availability. So the delta of time is zero, sub-zero, I would say. Yeah, the delta of time, I can guarantee you it's 4 hours up to 12 hours before you actually get your data from the cloud provider. And yes, indeed, it's only Amazon and Azure. Yeah. For this to understand how it works, if you want to retrieve your data from over there, you have to think like, I open a ticket at Microsoft and there's a technician going with a big USB disk, running towards another building, then pull out tapes, put it on the USB drive, run back to the original building, and then provide it over here like S3 storage. That is basically, I don't know, it's basically in real life like this, but it looks like, because of the time frame that is required for to fetch your data, in fact. It's, once again, we give the functionality to you for Veeam. If we take a look at this, because you have a repository on-prem and you move to cloud, there is no cost from the Veeam perspective to go for the cloud. You just pay your consumption in what we say in the capacity tier or the archive tier. And that is really important to know, because some vendors actually obligate you for 1 single megabyte that is going out of their product and being pushed in something else. You have to pay some money, some egress cost, I would say. But for us, for Veeam, it is for free actually. Do whatever you want, but keep in mind this one will cost you a little bit of money. I see hot and cool is mentioned as well at this slide. Now, funny thing, do you want to make it immutable? Checkbox. That's it. With the cloud, it's pretty easy. Yeah? So you just tick the box and things are being tagged as being immutable. In this case, it's being 30. 30 is a pretty good example, certain. If you do the copy instantly after, meaning imagine your current environment is being flooded or encrypted completely by a ransomware, then it's perfectly possible to just download the data again. Yeah? Because things in the cloud were impossible to be mutable or encrypted in this case. Keep in mind this one. Why does it increase costs? Not for Veeam, once again, but for the cloud provider, because of additional APIs that are being triggered. You know? This is how it looks like on AWS. I'm quickly going to skip it. Once again, how does it look like if you remove things? Well, actually, you won't be able to remove things, so it's being marked as error. Yeah? It cannot be removed. Yeah? The failure is over here. Yeah? It's being failed to remove things on this object store. Now, if we took a look at this complete picture, having this one immutable, having this one immutable, having this one immutable, if you want to go all the way, it's quite good. But now what happens? Imagine today you're being kicked out, and this one is being encrypted completely. The Veeam, this one, well, imagine you had a flood as well and your data center has been flooded completely. This data center, I would say, it's dead. It's game over. You cannot access your data, and if you can access your data, you have to wait until everything is dried up again. Well, actually, if you use that copy move thing and you have data in object storage in a cloud, because at that point in time it needs to be a cloud, it is by accident AWS, Azure, or even Google Cloud, then you can spin up actually over here a small VBR server linked to that object storage. And guess what's going to happen? Within 1 minute, you got a complete overview of all the available virtual machines in that object storage, meaning you can start restoring from object storage, and deploy the most critical virtual machine in the cloud, I would say. Keep in mind, we do the conversion, we do network mapping and stuff like that, but it won't be like instant. It won't be like everything works out of itself. You have to keep in mind that certain things are in the cloud not available and that were available on-prem. For instance, a dedicated card that triggers your production environment, or that a barcode scanner that is not available in the cloud. So some things are simply not working, of course. So, but it is an ideal use case to have the most important virtual machines running. Keep in mind, in the cloud, you start consuming things, so you have CPU, you have memory, you have active storage being used. It will cost a little bit, and you have to pay that to the service provider, AWS or Azure or Google, of course. Now, we have products like Google Backup, we have Azure Backup and AWS Backup, so you can start backing up those things in object storage again. Now, the sun is here, everything dried up, so everybody is happy again. Now, this thing actually is being backed up in object storage. You have your Veeam backup and replication server again. You relink to this object storage, and funny thing aside, you can start restoring over here. And this is mainly the reason why we say go for VUL licenses, because you can have socket licenses over here, but not in the cloud. We cannot count the sockets available in Azure. And be lucky, because there are a lot of sockets over there. The VUL license will license this virtual machine, and whether it was yesterday a physical machine, today a virtual machine, tomorrow a cloud machine, and then back, well, it's the same license. It moves along. So we got a complete circle now that is being available for everything. Now, I see we just hit the time button. For those that are still awake, I got something to announce. The other thing that was mentioned in the presentation of Sven was like the Office 365. This is the view of Office 365. I can announce you the most requested feature ever at Veeam. Apart from the 3-to-1 copy that has to be available as well in Veeam backup for Office 365. There's something like, and it was requested for so long. Oh, I'm logged in for sure. I'm going to close the screen. A restore portal. Now it's not available, I guess. Indeed, it's not available. It was localhost. There you go. Yeah, I'm still logged in. Anyhow, it's the portal a web GUI, self-service restore portal for Veeam backup for Office 365. This is, by the way, the first time I show this to people, actually. So you can see I am, at this moment, I'm Alex Wilbur, and I am capable of restoring directly or generating some kind of a list and then restore things. I am also open to change the scope because I defined Alex as a help desk administrator, and he will be, and it will take some time, he will be capable of restoring things for somebody else. So he will see the complete stack, and that's why it's taking longer, the complete stack of the company, except the executives. I've excluded them just as a test. And you will be able to restore emails, restore SharePoint items and stuff like that for the others. Because imagine the others are just incapable of doing it themselves. Yeah? They're not having the IT knowledge to do it. So that is basically it. There was a small surprise on the end. Sven? Any
Thank you
other
very much, Stan. Yes, I followed
questions?
because I'm not sure. I didn't see any questions this far. So the recording will be available, will be sent through as well. Normally, Eric, I would presume. So
Yes.
yeah, if there are no
Still
further.
this afternoon of tomorrow at last.
Oh, look. So, so Eric, you as well. Thank you, as you will be leaving Arrow. Thank you for all the partner academies. Unfortunately, we only had to do them always as a webinar because I joined Arrow when COVID just kicked in. So, best of luck in the new job. And then I'm gonna leave you to it so everybody can enjoy lunch. Then, Stan, thank you very much for the explanation.
Yes,
And
thank you, Stijn.
yeah, we'll speak each other very soon.
Right. Thank you all. Thank you for
Thank you.
joining.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.